Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm taking you back to May 2015. I was in London and I decided to visit Hampton Court Palace. This was my first visit to Kingston and it turned into a very memorable day. Before visiting Hampton Court, I had never been to Kingston. I first went there with my aunt and cousin. We took a bus from Putney. We walked around for a while. But my aunt was already in her 80s. She couldn't walk very far. Although in this video, she seemed to walk quite fast. But that didn't last very long. So we didn't explore very much. Kingston looked quite similar to Putney, but there were more shopping areas. There were also plenty of restaurants and cafes. Still, I became curious about Kingston. I started looking for other places to visit nearby. That's when I discovered Hampton Court Palace. I knew I had to go there. On another day, I took the bus from Putney to Kingston, and from Kingston, I took another bus towards Hampton Court. I can't remember the bus number now, but it took me quite close to the palace. I only had to walk a short distance. Then I arrived at the entrance. I bought my ticket. I remember paying about £17 in 2015. Of course, the price is much higher today. As I entered, I immediately felt that this was a special place. This was once the home of kings and queens, and Henry VIII was one of its most famous residents. Now let's talk about Henry VIII. He had 6 wives, and each wife had a very different story. Catherine of Aragon. Catherine was Henry's first wife. She was a Spanish princess. They were married for about 24 years. But Henry desperately wanted a son. Catherine gave birth several times. Only one child survived. Her name was Mary. She later became Queen Mary I. Then came Anne Boleyn. Henry became very interested in her. But Anne didn't want to be his mistress. She wanted to become queen. Henry wanted to marry her. But there was one problem. He was still married to Catherine. Eventually, Henry broke with Rome. His marriage to Catherine was annulled. Then Henry married Anne. They had a daughter. Her name was Elizabeth. She later became the famous Queen Elizabeth I. But Henry still wanted a son. Anne had several difficult pregnancies. Henry's feelings towards her changed. She was accused of adultery and treason. She was executed in 1536. Her marriage to Henry had ended in tragedy. Wife number 3, Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour had been one of Anne Boleyn's ladies-in-waiting. Henry married Jane only 10 days after Anne's execution. And Jane eventually gave Henry exactly what he had wanted for so long, a son. In 1537, Jane gave birth to Prince Edward at Hampton Court. Henry finally had his male heir. But sadly, Jane died only 12 days after giving birth on 24th October 1537 from postnatal complications. So, although Jane was the wife who gave Henry his son, she also became another tragic chapter in the story. Henry's fourth wife was Anne of Cleves, a German princess. This marriage was largely a political arrangement. Henry had not met Anne before the marriage, but when Henry finally met her, the king wasn't impressed. The marriage was annulled after only a few months, but Anne accepted the situation sensibly. She received property and a generous income and remained on good terms with Henry. Henry's fifth wife was Catherine Howard. She was young and became queen in 1540. But her marriage ended disastrously. Allegations were made about relationships she had had before and during her marriage to Henry. Catherine was eventually accused of adultery and treason. She was executed at the Tower of London in 1542, and the palace's haunted gallery is associated with stories of her desperate attempt to reach Henry before her arrest. And finally came Catherine Parr. Catherine was already twice widowed when she married Henry in 1543. She was intelligent, educated, and deeply interested in religion. Most importantly, she survived Henry. She also became an important influence on Henry's children and was the first English queen to publish books under her own name. After learning all these stories, I began exploring Hampton Court itself. I walked through the magnificent rooms and corridors, looking at the paintings, decorations, and enormous halls. One of the things that impressed me was the sheer grandeur of the palace. The Great Hall, in particular, gives you an idea of how spectacular Henry VIII's court must have been. I could imagine people gathering here centuries ago. Nobles, servants, musicians, and members of the royal court. There were paintings everywhere. There were beautiful decorations. And there were rooms that made me wonder what it must have been like to live in such an enormous palace.
I'm so excited I can weigh myself. Weigh myself. That's funny stretching, that. You see them big dresses? Court bachelors? Yeah. Well, the ladies take really shape clap them between their legs, and then they just, well, go to the toilet. Good for them. See, the gentleman is wearing socks under his breeches. Very nice.
I also came across people taking part in what appeared to be traditional games on a table. To this day, I'm still not completely sure what game they were playing. Perhaps it was a Tudor version of something like a board game. There were also performances taking place inside the palace. Watching people acting out scenes from the past made the history feel much more alive. Instead of simply reading about Henry VIII in a history book, I could actually see people recreating the atmosphere of Tudor England. Hampton Court isn't only about the palace. Outside, the gardens were absolutely beautiful. After spending time inside looking at royal rooms and paintings, it was wonderful to step outside into the open air. The gardens were enormous. There were carefully arranged flower beds, beautiful trees, wide open spaces, and shady areas where visitors could simply walk and enjoy the surroundings. I spent quite some time wandering around and taking everything in. The contrast was fascinating. Inside the palace, I was thinking about Henry VIII, royal politics, marriages, executions, and all the drama of the Tudor court. Outside, I could simply enjoy the beautiful scenery. The gardens reminded me that Hampton Court isn't just a place of history. It is also a beautiful place to walk, relax, and appreciate the landscape. and after more than 2 hours of exploring, I decided it was time to leave. But my day wasn't over yet. I took a bus back to Kingston, and this time I decided to explore a part of Kingston that I hadn't really seen during my first visit with my aunt. I headed towards the market square and spent more time walking around. It felt almost like discovering Kingston for the first time all over again. My first visit had been limited because my aunt couldn't walk very far. But now I had the freedom to explore at my own pace. And suddenly, my day had become 2 journeys in one. A journey through Tudor history at Hampton Court, followed by a journey through modern-day Kingston. Looking back, my visit to Hampton Court Palace in May 2015 was one of those days that stayed in my memory. I started the day simply wanting to see a famous palace, but I came away having learned so much about English royal history. I saw magnificent rooms, paintings, performances, and beautiful gardens. But most of all, I learned more about Henry VIII and his 6 wives. And even after learning their stories, I still couldn't completely understand one thing. Why did Henry become so cruel? Was it because he was obsessed with having a son? Was it because he had absolute power? Or was it simply the brutal nature of royal politics in Tudor England? Perhaps the truth is a mixture of all 3. What we do know is that Henry VIII was much more complicated than simply the king with 6 wives. He was intelligent, musical, athletic, and politically powerful. But he could also be ruthless when his desires and ambitions were challenged. And Hampton Court Palace allows us to walk through the very places where much of this extraordinary history unfolded. So, if you enjoyed traveling back in time with me to Hampton Court Palace, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more travel stories, walking tours, and interesting places from around the world. And I love to hear from you. Which of Henry VIII's 6 wives do you think had the most interesting story? And if you had been in Henry VIII's position, would you have wanted 6 marriages? Or would one have been enough? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!